Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to another episode of Go Beyond Sports in conversations with the most amazing people from sports, around sports, people who make sports what it is all about. As always, I'm extremely excited to have our guest today talk about sports and more insights into where she comes from. Uh, Thank you so much again for all the liking, for all the commenting, for all the subscribing. It is all of this that supports me to keep doing what I am, to continue to create more and to contribute more in ways that I can do. I am again not only excited but also very proud to have somebody who stands up so much and talks so much about women in sports. And she's somebody who I think we should just begin to get into a conversation with without wasting too much time. I am going to say that Vaidehi Vaidya is the founder of Women in Sports, originally an engineer. She was always inclined towards sports. During her engineering years, she started playing football and fell in love with the game, and so decided to make her career in sports by doing a unique course of MBA in sports industries from the University of Liverpool. She did a final research project with the UEFA on women's football in India, and this seeded the idea for working towards women's sports. Before the WISI, she was a football development consultant with the Asian Football Development Project, where he has handled over 11 different youth and women football development projects all over Asia. She's a member of the very first official FIFA fan forum, and she has written several articles on sports. She's uniquely qualified consultant and advisor for women in sports. Uh, Without wasting too much time, let me have Vidya here with us. Vaidehi, thank you
Hi.
so much, Miss Vidya Vaidehi, for being a part of this. There is so much that you have accomplished in the field of sports and in different areas of sports. Apart from being a player, to also being a consultant, to also being somebody who is very involved in the projects of sports. So my first question, which I always begin with, is to you also. We do know that you fell in love with sports, but then
Yeah.
why sports? What was this aspect of sports that you actually fell in love with?
First of all, thank you so much for having me, Sonali. It is a pleasure to be here, and I know that we have been talking. We have connected on phone, and we have been talking and
Yes.
exchanging thoughts and whatnot. So it's great to be here. As for
True.
your question, I think we all love sport, don't we? Like since yeah, I mean since our childhood, we love to go out and play,
Yes.
and sports is a very important part of our life. We make friends through sports,
Right.
right? So and in that process, some of us choose to make sports our careers. So according to me, sports is there in our lives. Whether to make it our career or not is our choice, and that's what I did. And I like everybody else, I love playing. I since I was a kid, I started with taekwondo. I played taekwondo for almost seven years, and
Wow.
then I entered engineering, like most of us. Uh, and then I saw a boys team in my college playing football, and I wondered whether I can play football with them. And that's how I started playing football, and I just loved it. And it felt like it was meant for me in a way. Um,
So
and that's when I decided.
did you defy being the only woman joining a boys football team, or how did it go? Like, were you accepted into a team, or did you kind of join a women's football team?
Yeah, so I started playing with boys team, and it was okay. Like many of them were in my class, and I've always been an athlete, so I'm used to being one of the few girls among boys. So it wasn't like a big deal for me, and they accepted that. It wasn't like you're a girl, you should not be playing football. There wasn't such discrimination, at least among the team that I played with, or the boys that I played with, which was great. Actually, some of them actually encouraged me, to go out and play. Some of them told me, okay, there is this club that you should go check it out. You can really play football. So I didn't actually really face any kind of discrimination or discouragement at that level. But if you want to play football at a higher level, you need to have a girls team. For example, if I wanted to play for a university level football or university level tournament, my college needs to have a girls team, and I wanted to play. So I decided that I am going to make a team for my college, because there wasn't any. And my college also helped me. When I went to the sports teacher, they helped me. They funded our jerseys, our travel to an extent. So they were very supportive. The only thing which was hard was to get girls to play football, actually. So it was, I literally had to go to every class in my college, and beg for them to come and join the team, and some of them did. So ultimately we had about 13 players in our team,
Wow.
which
Yeah.
was only enough
Right.
for
To get a team
probably,
together.
yeah,
But
11 aside,
then,
11 aside tournament.
tell me
Yeah.
something, Vaidehi, and the question that really comes to me is that, you know, it's nice. You've been kind of fortunate with the turn of events for you where things fall in place. But
Yeah.
how, like, in your, of course, now experience with sports and the insides of sports, has it not always been so difficult for people to not, in fact, it's the other way around. There are so many passionate players, but they do not have the teams to connect with. They do not have the tournaments to be able to go to, or the kind of monetary support, or the funds, or even jerseys for that matter, to be able to take their passion forward. So then what's your experience like, or how do you kind of know more about what it is like on the other side for these players, and especially women? Like you said, that it was so difficult, you literally had to kind of beg to women. So this is also something that I repeatedly say, that most women grow up playing as kids, and
Yeah.
somewhere we do not have that kind of culture that sort of carries it forward, unless
Yeah.
you're playing it professionally, unless you really have got to the level to be competitive. Women are very few and far in sports in the later years of their life. And of course,
Yeah.
we are going to get to that conversation very, very deeply. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. But do tell me, what has been your experience in knowing how difficult it is for most people to kind of get to a level of sports with the kind of support that is required?
Okay, so honestly, I've been in Europe for a while, and I'm in India for most of my life. So the difference being, India has a very education oriented culture, which
Right,
is perfectly fine. Every country has its own culture. We don't
right,
have sports culture like UK does or US does.
right,
I don't blame it at all. And that is probably one of the reasons why we have more funding in education field, probably more scholarship in education field, because we are education oriented country.
right, right,
Um, so I think, because we don't have a more sports oriented culture like US does, for example, their athletes playing at school level get scholarships to go
right,
for higher education. So
right.
we don't have that culture inbuilt in our education system
System.
itself.
Right,
I think that is a difficult part in sports field in general. But if we start including sports as our education curriculum, then things will be much easier. Then we can have scholarship based on sports. And
right,
I think that will partially, not entirely, I don't think it will entirely solve the problem of sponsorship and funding, but at
right,
least partially solve the problem of funding, because kids have to go to school. If they have
right,
to go to school, and if a sport is compulsory, they have to play a sport.
Right.
and then additional funding is not necessary from external sources, because then
Right.
school is providing all those facilities, school is
Right.
providing the coaches. So I think including sports in the education field will solve some of the sponsorship related problems, especially when the players are just beginning to play.
Right.
There are, when you go up the ladder, there is always funding. Like, for example, I don't think PV
Right.
Sindhu is facing any sponsorship problems.
Of
The
course.
problems are faced by grassroots players,
Grassroots.
probably, who
Right.
are
Right.
great, but they don't have, that brand value where,
Right.
the people will come and support you.
Right.
And I think those players need most support.
Right.
And I think including sports and education will solve that problem to an extent. I
Right.
think that would be a good idea, and I think government is working on it.
They are.
I
Of
think our
course. And then
sports
we have
minister
women like you who
has
come with
sort of-
something like Women in Sport India, and you take this endeavor forward. So the name itself reflects a lot of passion about sports and supporting women. So do tell
yeah.
us more about your, the journey to where you are today as a successful startup, because where you must have started the number of years ago that you did, in fact, our exposure to sports was far lesser than what it is even today. Today, if you go to see, yes, we are
Yeah.
talking sports more mainstream than we did. Like you very rightly
Yes.
mentioned, that we have come so primarily from an educative based society that sports, unless it becomes a part of our education system by itself, it may be difficult to make it a main focus. So, what is your experience with your journey so far?
So I'll tell you a little bit about women in sport. Women in sport, I started in 2015. That was only an online forum. The reason for starting Women in Sport India was to get in touch with women like me who are in fact in sports field, who are working in sports field.
Right,
And I was searching for some sort of mentorship, some sort of guidance from them. Obviously, I thought being a woman in sport would be much better for me, in terms of she must have gone through the same things that I'm going through.
right,
In those terms, I wanted to connect with more women like me.
right,
So that was the fundamental reason for starting Women in Sport India, and then very recently it became much more than that.
right.
Um, and and just to talk a little bit about, whether it's for, if you ask me honestly, everything is difficult. Everything new that you want to start,
Right,
it is going to be difficult. If you want to pave a new path, it is going to take a lot of efforts. People are going to criticize you.
right,
People are going to say it's not possible, it's too difficult. But
right,
it is your conviction about what you want to do, that essentially pushes you to do things. So I think, yes, when I started, things were difficult. I didn't have role models around me, which is a big difference today. Women and girls actually do have role models to look up to, and to aspire to be one.
right,
So everybody, like, girls want to be PV Sindhu, girls want to be Saina Nehwal, Sania Mirza. There are a lot of women who are coming up as an
right,
athlete,
right,
which wasn't the case when I started. Probably which wasn't the case when you started playing as well.
right,
Um, so yeah, making that decision to come into sports was a huge, huge, it's like a bomb on my
yes,
family. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you really want to do something, you stop giving excuses,
right.
and you just do it. So that's what I
So tell me
did.
something then, Vaidehi, and I'm going to again, because this question really comes then, that yes, we all know that somehow because of our systems, because of our cultures, because of a lot of things, uh, entrepreneurship opportunities for sports startup in general are far and few, especially when you're a woman oriented startup. So how
Yeah.
the conditions different then when compared to, say, other sporting nations like the UK and the US? Again, I know while we are talking, there is so much of a shift that's already happening. But what really is then the primary difference that even if we could start incorporating, there would be so much more that we can learn from.
I don't think there is a lot of difference in women's sports in
Mhm.
probably Western countries or any other countries. Even in UK, their primary sport is football, and women's football is just started coming up. Their
Right,
league has just started getting attention,
right,
whereas we have been independent for only 70 years, and in that 70 years, in within last 6 to 7 years, the acceptance of women's sports in
right.
our society has been exponential. So I think
Yes,
our society is equally open to women's sports, if not more.
right, right,
I find that very positive. The only difference I find is probably the professionalism and the organization structure.
right,
Or I'm not talking about governing bodies. I am talking about how the sport is organized
right,
in at different levels,
right,
from national federation or national tournaments to the
right,
district tournaments. So I think
right,
that organization of sport is somewhere we need to work on. And I think we need more manpower to do that. I think what yeah we need more people working at that level, because I think even at top governing bodies, the manpower is still lacking. We need more people working even at grassroots level or district level. We need
right,
more people working on this structure. We need more organized uh, hierarchy of the sport.
right,
I think that is where I see the difference, probably.
right.
And same goes for women's sports. I think women's sport is even less organized than
Right.
men's sports,
So
because
what is the change then which you would want to see in the sports industry and the startup culture, like you said, like you mentioned a few points about the there being more manpower, there being more hierarchy, there be more people who are into it. So what's the kind of change then you think would actually be able to bring this about?
I think first, all the federations, all the startups even need to look at what we already have. So, for
Right.
example, there are already national level tournaments which are happening, which are conducted
Right.
by governing bodies. There
Right.
are national leagues in case of football. Uh, Obviously, it differs from sport to sport, but there
Right.
are private leagues which are available, like
Yes.
IPL,
Lots.
badminton league, Premier Badminton.
PBL.
Uh,
Yes. Kabaddi.
yeah.
Pro football. There's
So
lots.
yeah, so many. So ISL.
Yeah.
So we need to look at what we already have,
Right.
what opportunities we already have,
Right.
and then take a breather and make sure that these opportunities are properly organized. So as simple as making sure that yearly calendar of all the matches is ready at least a year before. I think
Right.
that will solve a lot of problems, because I have faced this myself many times. If anybody is organizing, even like, it's a state level or district level tournament, which comes under the top governing body,
The governing bodies. Yes.
even they don't know whether the ground is or the court or
Is
whatever
available.
is going to be available tomorrow,
Right.
or something pops up. So
Right.
that's not professionalism.
Yes.
We have to be very professional. Everything we do has to be very well organized. If we
Right.
do that, lot of our manual work or repetitive work is going
Right.
to get done.
So
And then that brain space or that workspace probably, or
right.
work effort,
Right.
is then can be used for something else.
Yeah. So
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 I
you
think we
think
need
this
to,
change of
yeah.
work ethic and this change of attitude towards sport, bringing in more professionalism, do you think then kind of more corporates coming in, stepping in, would actually change the structure of the way sports is looked at in our country? Would that kind of bring some kind of a revolution? And there are
Making
already,
it
this is already happening, so there are the bigger organizations all stepping into seeing where the sports potential lies with with the people of our country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think well organized professional sport at any level, and it doesn't have to be at national level, it can be a
Right.
gully tournament for all I
Absolutely.
care.
Absolutely.
If it is well organized, if
Right.
you are professional about it,
Yeah.
then you know what you want to do in it. And if you
Right.
know what you want to do in it, you are very well able to convince the sponsors.
Right.
Okay, we have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven things in this tournament.
Right.
You may want to come in for one to three things. You may want
Right.
to sponsor one, two, three. And
Right.
then they know that, okay, this is what you want to do, and this is what my money is getting into.
Right.
They would be more willing to put in the money if they know, if they have clear cut idea what their money is going into, basically.
Right.
If it
Right.
is not organized,
Right.
obviously from a business perspective anybody will hesitate, right? So I
Right.
think yes, being professional and being organized will
Right.
bring more people into sponsorship and financing and
Right.
funding in sports
So
for sure.
in fact, just yesterday there was an article I read, and I don't quite recall all of the content of it, but it was more in the lines of sports being just being there as a funded entity rather than sports making money. So the idea that it is still looked upon as only a CSR activity or a corporate funding for
Yeah,
sports. And I mean, so much of that happening, and like even in our casual conversation, we talk about a tournament, and immediately it's about somebody funding you, somebody giving you that money to kind of have it. When does sports then actually move to actually being able to make money? Like, there are startups, there is you, there is somebody like me, there are so many others wanting to get into it. The whole passion for sports definitely wants to make it a contributive idea, and yet at the same time there is a very very thin line between the business aspect of sports as well. So then how do you kind of get to that making money out of sports without losing the value of what sports stands for?
absolutely. I think it's a very good question, and I am a firm believer of uh, not sports not being a humanitarian project.
Right.
Rather, we should look at sports as professional business. That was one of the reasons why I registered Women in Sport India as a private limited, not non profit organization.
Right.
Because I why can't women's sports make money, right?
Right.
If
Right.
you give good value to people, I am, or anybody who is into women's sports is entitled to make money. How are we going to
Absolutely.
sustain otherwise?
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
think it's about the thought process, and it's about the attitude. I
Right.
think if you know that you want to make money out of it,
Right.
absolutely you can, uh, while not losing the ethics and the morality of sport.
Right, right, and that is
And
what
I
is
don't
so primary for sport, because sport is just so only based on these human values. The moment the human
absolutely.
values are taken out of sport, sport just doesn't remain a sport anymore.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I would encourage people to consider making money out of it is, then you treat it as a profession,
Right,
right? You treat it as something that you are making money out of it, so you have to provide the best thing to people
right. And that
because you are
comes
making
back
money
to
out of
your
it.
point when you were saying that you bring in professionalism. So this is kind of,
Yeah,
this goes hand in glove, that the moment you kind of bring in the money, it also brings in the profession in professionalism, and it's like uh, pleasing your consumer in the best way
yeah,
possible,
and
and then you become a
absolutely.
better
And
brand.
yeah, and when you do that, you want to provide, when you decide that you want to provide the best things to your clients or consumers, then you start bringing in good things in your business as well.
Absolutely.
Good technology, good people,
Right.
so that automatically ups your game in
Yes.
sport on field even, you know.
Right.
So I
Right.
think it is a, but like I said, there's a fine line between making money out of sport and making
Right.
it completely commercial. So we all have to know
Yes.
that line.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so tell me something. So, of course, you would be aware of this phenomenon that we have in our country primarily. Of course, it probably must be everywhere because there is sports scholarships as so, where uh, playing a particular sports gets you the public sector job, and that is what keeps most people just into the game and into the sport, and possibly the only reason why they're doing this. What are your views on
Yeah,
this?
it's good and bad. I think it's
Yeah.
good that athletes are getting financial stability at the end of their,
Right.
at the end of the spectrum, and they can see that getting into sports can get me a good job, a good government job, which
Right.
is a good thing, because then more and more people will try and get to the national level, international level, so on and so forth. But the
Right.
other side of it is, then sometimes athletes look at it only as a way to get a government
And that
job.
is what I was wanting to ask you. So, what are your views on that, or how have you experienced this in your years of being in this?
Well, uh, my 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 view is plain and simple. I think it's a good thing that they want to get a job, but they need to also think beyond that job.
Yeah.
They also need to think that if they perform consistently year on year, then the benefit that they're going to get is going to be much more than what they would get from a government job, right?
Right.
And obviously not everybody can reach like the top level. Only 1% of total athlete community reaches
Right.
the professional level that maybe PV Sindhu has, or Saina
Right.
Nehwal has, maybe Mary Com has. But we can aspire to be there. The
Right.
athletes can definitely aspire to be there, and I think that should not, the government job should not be an aim. But at the same time, athletes also need to understand their skill, their body, and how far are they going to reach. And coaches and people around them play a big part in it. So if you know that, okay, getting a government job is going to be my thing or my aim, that's perfectly fine. But if you know that you have skills to reach international level, then government job should not be your aim. Then your aim should be to reach global level. But then you or me cannot define that for them. We
Absolutely.
are far away. So I think the athletes need to understand themselves. The
Yeah.
coaches need to understand their athletes and make sure that the athletes also know how far they are going to reach. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a choice, honestly.
Yeah.
But
It is.
I definitely feel that athletes need to start looking beyond the
Yes.
government
And
job
I
as
think
well.
somewhere again, it kind of comes back to the very first thing that you mentioned, that the moment sports and education come together, there will be a huge shift because of who we are as a country. Because
Yeah.
again, sports to get imbibed and to look at the sports that we are talking about, or the level of sports that we are talking about, it really has to become not only so like when we talk about grassroots playing, it has to also become grassroots culture for our country. And unless that happens, we will not be able to look at all these shifts that we all talk about, happening. Of course, I mean, I would say that yes, we are getting there. I mean, we all know there is a lot of government initiative, there is a lot of public initiative,
Yes.
there is a lot of,
Absolutely.
um, corporate initiative. So there is huge shift happening. And then again, it's not only just women's sport or men's sport. Of course, I mean, I would say it is unfortunate that, like you also mentioned, that it's not just India, but world over, that somehow women in sports has always been lesser than men in sports. So then I would ask you, when you were doing your project on women football in India with the UEFA, what really was your observation, and what is it then actually that even kind of seeded this idea for you? Like, what was that aspect that actually got you to where you are today?
It. I think the project was one of the best things that happened to me, because I'm through and through city girl. So I've stayed in city my entire life.
Right,
I didn't know what difficulties the girls staying in the rural region go through. For us it is very simple, something like wearing sports attire is a given for us. We go
right.
play outside, we wear shorts or tracksuits,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
our parents don't stop us, right? But when you go in the rural regions of India, maybe now things have changed. This research happened 7 years back.
Right.
The rural regions, it's very difficult for them to wear sports appropriate attire.
Yes,
They are not allowed to,
yes,
and because of that, obviously if you're wearing, you obviously can't wear sari or
yes.
clothing
The
which
game gets
is harmful
hampered.
to you when you play.
Yes,
So that stops many girls from getting into sports.
right.
For something which is very easy for us
Which is a
becomes
taken.
a hurdle, an obstacle for girls staying in the rural regions.
So, are there
Or
any more of these, whether he, while we are on the topic, and I know I don't want to stop your flow once you start with it, but are there many more of these kind of, lesser known difficulties which we take for granted, or we just take as a taken? But so many sports players, not only just women, but yes, of course, highlighting what women are going through far more, since that was your project. But what is it that you can tell us, what are these difficulties that they are facing that most of the times we are not even aware of?
the other thing which I hadn't considered before was language, and I've spoken about this before, and I'm proud that India has so many different languages.
Absolutely.
But when players come together, especially in a team game, if the players have different languages, how are you going to communicate on ground? It
Right.
becomes very difficult, and we often ignore this. And I think in Chakde there is a small scene about it, and it's a
Yes.
reality. It's very very real in India. And
Right.
obviously we are all proud that we have different religions, we have different languages, we have different cultures. But when it comes to sports and team sports, let's consider hockey, for example. If players are on ground and if they can't communicate with each other, how are you going to
True.
play?
Absolutely.
The communication becomes a crucial part
Yes.
in sports. So I think that is one of the things which I hadn't considered at all.
Right. Right.
The other thing is also safety. We take safety for granted,
Yes.
especially coming from tier 1 or tier 2 cities.
Absolutely.
Transportation is very easy for us. Buses, railways, airplane travel, it's very easy. We have seen it everywhere. But coming from rural regions, there is one bus a day probably, or even lesser than that. That's the frequency of buses in some regions. And that too, the buses go through some difficult dangerous areas, which makes the safety of people traveling in the buses uh,
A difficult
like
difficulty. Right.
important thing. Yeah.
Right.
um
And
so
which
i
is
think
also
i
reason
think
why
safety
most women
is
don't
also.
end up traveling. And I think that kind of brings us back to one
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
aspects of women being lesser in sport.
yeah, absolutely. And many of the players that we see today, or the talent that we see today, not just girls, they come from rural region.
Yes.
And transportation and the safety of these young women or girls is many times at risk. So I think that is another issue which stops them from playing sports or going beyond certain limit. I mean, they
Right.
play in their district probably, but going from district to state to national becomes that much harder for them.
Right.
So I think that is one of the issues which we don't consider, which we take for granted, but is something that needs to be considered as well. I'm hoping that things are are not the same anymore,
Right.
um, but it is an issue still.
No, but the
I
aspects that
think,
you have
and
highlighted, whether he, of course, no matter how much we work towards, but considering that we really are such a huge country and we are so dense, even
yeah,
if you talk about grassroots, our grassroot itself is so dense that penetrating that grassroot itself is such a huge exercise. I mean, anybody
yeah,
who's tried to touch base would know that we're like a spider's web. Like, you're just, it's difficult. You just don't know where you begin and where we end. So it's like, common knowledge can't even
yeah.
take you there. Do you think then these really some very key aspects that you have pointed out are one of the reasons why we see lesser medal winners for India or Olympic winners for India, where we are still lagging behind in our tallies because of these kind of very basic hurdles? Of course, talent hunt is going on huge and wide in our country, yes, but then even if you spotted a talent, and like you say, if there is somebody extremely talented, to pluck them out of that system, to be able to give them and provide them itself becomes such a huge difficulty. So what would you say are these kind of hurdles that we are facing, or are these very similar to what you've been talking about all this while?
Um, medal winning is, yeah. I mean, what I've been talking about is one part of it, but the also the other part of it is, I see in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, for girls and boys, there are a lot of distractions,
Of
honestly.
course.
I mean,
Yes.
and I think you can go, I mean, you can ask anybody. I think playing on your, playing video game is much more easier than going out and running and exercising. So I think distractions is a big part of having the reason for having lesser number of girls, especially in tier 1 and tier 2 cities. um, but obviously now the things have started changing. you know the earlier reason was the girls did not have any role model, or they did not see somebody like them. If they are walking on a road, they don't see girls playing, they obviously are not going to think that they need to play. But now things are changing. Now girls are seeing more girls playing on ground. So I think that is an encouraging fact. And it is going to take time to have more girls at grassroots level. It's a process. It's not going to be an overnight success. It's not going to be over year success. More girls will encourage other girls to come and play, and in that way, the grassroots pool of girls playing will increase. And once that number increases, it's like a pyramid. The base is broader, and then it becomes lesser and lesser and lesser. So if you have wider base, then the people reaching at the top is also going to be higher. So I think the medal tally will increase if we have wider pool of girls playing at grassroots level. But at the same time, we need to make sure that the coaches at grassroots level also understand it is not their job to create professional players. It is their job to make sure that these girls are having fun so that they keep on coming.
Right.
And that is somewhere I think we are lacking. That is where we need to concentrate more. We don't want to lose girls who have joined the grassroots sport at any
Right.
point of time. If we force them to be competitive, if we force them to win, then we are going to lose even the girls that we have gained so far. So I think grassroots is an important, how should I put it, important subject or important topic that
Right.
everybody needs to work on.
Right.
So
So
Yeah, I
at
mean,
WISI, is that something that you're working on? And what is it that you primarily look to create with the projects that you're taking up right now, especially for women?
so the first and foremost, through WISI, I'm trying to make sure that people working in sports are talking to each other, which is not happening because there are a lot of people working and
Of
doing their
course.
best
Of course.
to better women's football, women's sports in India, but their effort is so much, and I think that if they start working together, the efforts that they have to put in to develop women's sports in general will be lesser.
Right.
So that is the first thing that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to connect people working in women's sports to each other. I'm trying to facilitate
Right.
communication between them. The second thing that I want to do is encourage more women into off-field of sports, because we see a lot of women athletes now. We know them, and the number is going to increase by the day, or by the year, or by the month. But we need more staff, or we need more supporting system who are also women, to get involved in sports off field, to support these athletes, as coaches, as referees, as administrators, as agents. Um, so I'm trying to do that through Visi, because I think we are lacking balance in that side of sports. I think we
That
are.
is that has been my greater endeavor, is to be able to bring these aspects of sports at the forefront, and the people who actually make sports what it is. And that's what I keep
Yeah,
telling, that it takes so many people to make one player, and it's
yeah,
those people
exactly.
also, that need to come into, they need to come together somewhere, because again, like at grassroots levels, their exposure to this is so little. And again,
Yeah,
very well that you did highlight is that with tier one there is everything available, and yet there is this unwillingness to make the most of where it is, whereas at the grassroots and the rurals we have nothing available, and yet they're the ones who are willing to get everything that is possible. So we somewhere
yeah,
do have to find this way to bridge the two. I wouldn't even say it's two gaps, but it's just two things at poles apart, and we just need to find a way to bring this together.
absolutely. Absolutely, I agree. And one way to do that is to make sure that they are connected at some
Right.
level. Because
Right.
there are non-profit organizations, sports organizations working in the rural region, and then there are academies working in tier one, tier two cities.
Right.
Imagine if they, start
Synergize
communicating with each
together.
other,
Absolutely.
then it's good,
Yes.
and nobody loses. It's a win-win situation. And
Absolutely.
also, people working in women's sports should think of other people as not as their competitors, but their partners,
Yes.
uh, because that's how you grow. We have 1.3 billion population. Single organization or single person is not going to reach all of them. So we need a
Absolutely.
lot of people working.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, communication is the first step, then we build on that. So
Right.
these two things are what I'm trying to do right now, and there are a lot of things in my mind, but one step at a time.
Absolutely.
Otherwise I'll not get done anything, if
No,
I
I
try to
agree.
do everything at once. Yeah.
Whether it just seems like we can go on and on and on talking,
Yeah.
because there is so much, and there is so much insight, there is so much information, and there's so much clarity of thought that you have in this whole realm of sports and women's sports, that it is absolutely a delight hearing you talk about it. And thank you so much for being a part of it. I mean, I think everybody who's heard this conversation and people who will be listening to it would definitely in some way be able to understand where you are coming from, and know that the points that you've highlighted I mean, there is so much that I'm going to take back from here and from this conversation. So I'm very sure that there'll be so many people at different aspects and levels who may be able to get something out of what you are talking. Thank you once again, Vaidehi, for being a part of this show with me. And yes, it's about all of us going beyond the sport and creating far more. uh, Once again, thank you everybody for listening, for always being a part of supporting sports in whatever way that you do. So thank you so much again,
Thank you
Vaidehi,
so much.
and I do hope to see
Thank
you
you
on
so
the
much,
other side.
Sonali.
There is a question
Yes,
whether
of
he
course.
just take
Yeah.
that, is that what, why is it that if an athlete being on the top tier and the upcoming athlete has to usually be under their shadow? I mean, is there anything that you have to talk about that?
Can you repeat that, Sonali? I didn't
So why is it
catch
that,
it.
okay, so I'm going to try and understand what it means, is that why is it that an athlete who's on the top tier, the other upcoming athletes have to be under their shadow most of the times?
Uh, I am not sure if usually that is the case, but it completely depends. According to me, this is my opinion. I'm not an expert on how the hierarchy works actually, but if you are good at your sport, then you are going to be that athlete at one point of time.
Right,
So even if you feel like you are under their shadow at this moment, do your best and then
right,
you can reach where they are. I don't think I don't actually understand what they mean by being under their shadow. Is it that you are not getting enough attention? Is it that you're not getting enough funding? I'm not sure which
right,
aspect of it they're talking about. But the only thing you can do at this point of time is do your best and
right.
put your heart and soul into it, because being number one or being top is not hard, it's not easy. And the people who are at the top, they have worked their asses off. um,
Absolutely.
so if you do that, if you put your heart and soul into it, you will reach that level as well. So don't think about it from being under their shadow or being someone who is lesser than them. That's not, I don't think that that's the way to think about it. It's, you should just concentrate on what you want to do in life and where you want to reach, and then leave the rest of it, you know. Yeah, that's the advice, that's the best advice I can give. I'm not in your position, of course, but yeah. uh,
Thank you so much, Vaidehi, once again.
Thank
And
you.
of course, the
Thank you.
advice
Thanks a
comes
lot.
from the sports person. And, when you think like a sports person, that's when you can, you're able to talk the language of sports. So once again, you've been highlighting so much the importance of the contribution that everyone should be to each other in sports and to put in your best, like you've mentioned. Thank you so much again, and hope to see you on the other side very soon. Thank you again,
Thank you so
everyone.
much, Sonali. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.